Imagine a place where the boundaries of age, industry, background, and culture melt away, replaced by a shared desire to explore the depths of our collective experiences here on the open, shaded porch. Amidst an atmosphere of serenity and tranquility, leaders from all walks of life gather to share their stories, the stories that shape their very beings and doings. This is the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Layla Marouf.
I'm back on the porch with world-renowned neurologist Richard Cytowic. We've been discussing the impact of digital technology on our brains as explored in his latest book, Your Stone Age Brain in the Screen Age. We've delved into the concept of our Stone Age brains, highlighting how our ancient cognitive limitations struggle to keep up with the constant bombardment of digital distractions. Now, Richard, I want to talk about something I learned from your book. People may have seen you on 60 Minutes years ago discussing this. You're a pioneer in the research of synesthesia, and I've heard about anesthesia, which seems like the opposite. Can you tell us more about synesthesia?
Anesthesia means no sensation. Synesthesia is joined or coupled sensation. So there are kids born with 2, 3, or all 5 of their senses hooked together so that my voice, for example, is not only something that they hear, but they might also see it or taste it or feel it as a physical touch. Now, for a long time, science just dismissed this and said, oh, this cannot possibly be real. They're just making it up. They want attention. They're having residual hallucinations from their days of pot smoking and LSD. When I came across a synesthete, I was really fascinated by this. And I thought, oh, let's take a look at this. What's going on? And I told my colleagues about Michael Watson, who was the man who tasted shapes. That's the title of the book I wrote about him. And they said, well, what's his CAT scan show? And I said, no, you don't get it. He doesn't have a hole in his head. He has something extra. And they looked at me like I was insane and said, oh, man, you'd better drop this. It's too weird, too new age. It's going to ruin your career. Well, obviously, that hasn't happened. So
Gladly.
I've written a number of books about synesthesia. But what's happened is that the zeitgeist has changed. The culture has changed. And so now younger people have been willing and eager, in fact, to take this up, to do research, to write papers, to organize conferences and all that. Back when I started this in 1980, I would get phone calls or letters from graduate students saying, oh, I would love to do my PhD thesis on this, but my chairman would never allow it. He'd throw me out of the program because it was seen as too kooky. Because it's messy, it's a subjective experience. I mean, it's a first-person experience. And the critics wanted a third-person verification of a first-person experience, typically by having scans of the brain. It took a while for people to come around. I spent my first 15 years pushing back against the naysayers. And finally, they got the pictures that they asked for, and they had to shut up. And so now synesthesia is, it's all over the world. There's conferences all over the world. I couldn't be happier.
How does it enhance our understanding of perception?
Well, it's changed the way that we conceive of how the brain is organized. Initially, again, when I started back in 1980, a concept called modularity was reigning, and that is we had these separate modules in the brain, a language module, a vision module, a speech module, etc. And by definition, there was no overlap among them. So obviously, synesthesia couldn't possibly exist like this. Well, when synesthesia says, but it does exist, so therefore modularity must be wrong, we have to change our theories. And so now we know that the brain is multisensory. It's not a question of do synesthetes have crosstalk in their brain, but rather how much do they have? And they have much more than you and I do. Because we're not consciously aware of the crosstalk that's going on in our brain all the time. For example, speech and vision are so tightly linked that even bad ventriloquists convince us that the dummy is doing the talking. And likewise, cinema, we think that the dialogue is coming from the mouths on the screen, not the speakers that are surrounding us. So these are illusions that are so common that we don't give them a second thought. So the answer is that yes, the brain is highly cross-connected, and this is one reason why you mentioned intuition. Intuition is another way of knowing. And if you can shut up the chatter of the rational mind, there's a wonderful thing. Reason is just the endless paperwork of the rational mind. And you can do this by meditating, by exercising, by going for a walk and looking up at the sky. All of a sudden, you're going to have all these thoughts and sensations and ideas that come to you, which is if you were sitting at your desk or in front of a computer trying to write something, it's not going to happen because you're so busy with the screen. And walking is a great way to get in touch with this. The famous writers like Virginia Woolf, who Leaves of Grass, Whitman, were great famous boulevardiers, and they would say, as I, take my walks, all these ideas come up, these characters, these plots, etc., and I just need to write them down, And so I suppose you could go. I mean, I've gone for a walk with my phone in my pocket, but I'm looking up at the sky or the trees and all that, and I'll get an idea, so I could take the phone out and dictate a voice memo to myself, so that I won't forget this brilliant thought that I just had. And then I put it back in my pocket. And
that's very mindful of you.
and continue on. Well, I know I know that if I don't make some gesture to help me remind myself of what I just thought, it's going to fade away. It's like the morning amnesia. We have this incredible dream, and we wake up. And then we can't remember what it was about. We're so fantastic in images and this, that, the other happened, and it fades from your memory.
But aren't they doing this technology that they want to download our dreams so we can watch them in the morning? Did you hear about that?
I don't know how they would do that. That sounds very that sounds like science fiction to me.
It does sound like that, but things are happening so fast that never say never. It's all, it's going to.
I would like to see the evidence that who's ever saying they can download our dreams, that they can actually do it, because I can't imagine any sort of way that could plausible way that could happen yet.
I read something yesterday about a Japanese company that was doing this experiment about, and you talked about that in your book, about that proximity of two brains together. And they did the experiment that two were sleeping and they exchanged one word in their dreams between the two. Don't ask me how or the science behind it, but I don't know.
Strange things can happen, and science may not have an explanation for them. But it's possible because, we are interacting and communicating on multiple levels, not just verbal. There's an awful lot of body language going on. And of course, if people are intimate, then their pheromones are also interacting. Couples been together for a long time. Their biomes, they've cross-infected one another with their individual germs, and so two people literally do have stuff. And going back together, when people sleep together, they actually do sleep together. These wonderful studies where the camera is above the bed and is recording every 7.5 minutes, and you see that their postures shift in sync with one another. Even a cat was slept on the bed there, and the cat was in sync with the two boyfriend girlfriend. So we do harmonize with one another. And going back to the scanners, yes, the two individuals and scanners that are linked were showing similarities in the diffuser and the white matter.
But that harmony you're talking about is something I think that generations to come are going to miss because of the side effect of all this technology in making them less socializers, less of interpersonal skills, less of everything that we talked about. That at one point in time, how are they going to be in harmony with the other human being, right? And it's going to be, as we said, it's more difficult unless, we make them aware, we educate them about so much of what we're talking about in much deeper ways, consistent ways, that there won't be a way out of this. Because I don't know, I just feel like we have a mission. We have to do that, or, I really, really feel that way. But I want to go back to a very interesting point that you talked about, which is silence and the importance of silence at times. And I think in knowledge mindfulness, I mentioned that as disconnection and the importance of connection and disconnection. Always having those two together enhances the other in so many ways, because it is, like you said, it's the nutrition that we need, and we only think about material, tangible things. And as you mentioned, it's today's generations that are accepting that there's always an intangible side of those tangibles we've always been exposed to. And it is time to take into consideration the importance of realizing the tangibles and how we can feed those. How can we feed our emotions, our soul, as much as we feed our body? And that brings me to social media and, how they exfoliate so much that emotion content. How we mimic each other in so many ways. When you yawn, I yawn because of the mirror cells we have. But now AI is doing that. And we know that they're mimicking all that. There's no emotions there, but there's that mimic. So how can we prevent more of the tech companies, social media, of affecting or manipulating even the emotions of the younger generations, in your opinion?
You have to say no to them. I think that's really the short answer. One is realizing just what's going on, what you're facing, what you're up against, taking a more defensive posture instead of just blindly and naively accepting whatever's coming through your screen and say, wait a minute, what's all this about? Do I really need this? Is this enhancing my life right now? Could I be doing something else? I said that silence is an essential nutrient. We need periods of rest and quiet. That's how the brain recharges itself. Whether it's sitting under a tree or in a park, you could just be one tree downtown, surrounded by concrete otherwise, but that one tree is enough. That one green thing is enough to take a break. When we're at our computers or our phones and all that, stand up and take a break for 20 seconds. Look out the window, what the Dutch call niksen. Doing nothing for a few moments is plenty to just sort of recharge. It's like letting up on the clutch or hitting the brakes. You're going to just sort of stop this race car going downhill for a moment so you can catch your breath, and then you can move on. And you're correct. You can't have something positive without knowing its opposite negative. There's no way to know that. So you've got to have the two polar extremes. And so, yes, stopping, pausing, taking a break, looking out the window, looking at the birds or the leaves, looking at the clouds is enough to be this interrupt function.
I think many people are kind of realizing now the importance of their well-being, as they call it. And they do take, let's say, breaks where they go to meditate and all that. But I think what's still missing, maybe in our daily routine, how do we integrate those pockets of silence or of disconnection from gadgets, from people, and just being on our own with our thoughts, with our reflections and all that. And that brings me to the word happiness, and that people are hooked in the pursuit of happiness. And I'd love to hear your insights about that.
Yeah, if they're in our foundational documents, the pursuit of happiness, Thomas Jefferson wrote. But we get hooked on what's called the hedonic treadmill. We're trapped in, as the Buddhists would say, we're trapped in an endless cycle between desire and longing and getting it. And then as soon as we get what we want something else. Desire is extremely poorly satisfied. It's very, very brief, if at all. So it's like being on a treadmill that we can't get off of, or playing a rigged game that you can't win. As long as you think that things are going to make you happy, you won't be happy. You'll never be happy. You have to be happy with what you already have. And this is a distinction I make between loneliness and solitude, because, we're having this epidemic of loneliness, particularly among young people and teenagers and all this. And I said, loneliness wants something. It wants to fill this empty space. So loneliness wants, but solitude has. So when I'm with myself, whether I'm looking at the wall or at clouds or whatever, I'm quite happy being by myself. It's for me, I don't need to be doing something all the time. To be left alone is a great treat, because then I can do all sorts of things that I want on my own. So for some people, it's very satisfying. For others, to be alone is a punishment of some sort. So it depends on your temperament, I think. But you can change your perspective. You see, you can say, oh my God, I'm all by myself. I'm bored. Frankly, I don't understand how anybody could be bored. I haven't been bored since I was, 2 years old. There's so much to do. There's so many wonderful things to explore and think about and go to, and adventures to have. So you can change your perspective and say, no, I'm not lonely. I'm sitting here by myself. But, people are frightened of silence. We teach this to our medical students. You want to get the patient to disclose something? Sit on your hands and bite your tongue and resist the urge to say something to fill this silence, because guess what? The patient will fill the silence, and they'll start to talk about things that you would never get if you fire them with all sorts of rat-a-tat questions.
That's very, very true. I think also in knowledge mindfulness, the framework really and the concept acknowledges what you were saying, but it adds one thing too, and that is when you're happy with yourself and with being with yourself, that kind of happiness radiates on the other. So we advocate also the joy that comes from that radiation on the other in the form of unity and harmony and coherence with the other. And I think that's kind of the ultimate feelings, that you feel a bigger reward inside, fulfillment, purpose, that radiation, that happiness within and fulfillment within is radiating on the other in terms of in our communication, in our behavior, in whatever decision and impact we take in the world. So I think also maybe this is a piece for next generations to think about, and how they can harmonize that feeling of we instead of always thinking of me.
Well, you're quite true that people who are confident and content and know what they want, they do radiate this peacefulness about them. And so that makes it very attractive. And so people want to be around them. And, when you reach that level of satisfaction, it's so easy to be generous and kind to other people. It takes so much effort to be mean and cruel and nasty and, indignant. It's so much easier to just smile and say, how can I help you?
Yes, very true, very true. I want to shift now to businesses and organizations. I don't know from your experience, how are they managing their digital well being, their employees' digital well being? A lot of these businesses and organizations talk about mental health per se, but are they aware of the digital well health or well being?
That I don't know. I can't really answer that question. I know that they have sleep consultants because they realize that their employees are wired and tired and they're not sleeping. So they have sleep consultants who help to go in and discuss sleep hygiene and why a good night's sleep is the best thing you can possibly do, not only for your career, but also for your brain and your body.
I don't know, but I think maybe businesses and organizations need to pay more attention to an integrative approach of well being. Instead of focusing on only sleep or only, disconnection or only mental health, how about all this together, in an integrative approach? What do you think?
Well, that's an ideal kind of situation, but it really doesn't have anything to do with what the company's purpose. So if you're a business person and you're always looking at the bottom line, you want your employees to be as productive as possible. I think it takes a really enlightened employer to even think along these lines of, a happy workforce is going to be a very productive workforce, and we'll have low turnover, etc. But whether they think along these lines or not, I don't really know. I mean, I'm not a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, it's just that I read more and more of realizing that their human capital is an important factor to invest in. And as much as you think of the bottom line, that's where the interconnection happens, right?
True, but I mean, take investment banking, for example. These people are putting in 100-hour work weeks. They're dying at their desks. Only very recently, I read this in the Wall Street Journal that companies are having the higher ups are having to say we've got to put limits on how much you can force these people to work to get these deals done, etc. And I know that millions and billions of dollars are on the line, and this can make people do crazy things. But I think there are a lot more industries that are just riding a rough herd on their employees, as opposed to those who are thinking, how can we make them, the most productive? There's also complaints about, these whatever the current generation's called, Z or whatever. They're shocked that they're expected to put in not 8 hours a day. Well, when am I going to get my dry cleaning done? When am I going to go to the gym? When am I going to be able to do the? How am I going to? It's like you're being paid $200,000 a year, and you don't want to work for that. But that's the attitude: is that these young people are just totally spoiled when it comes to what the workplace is all about. That work means work. It doesn't mean taking care of your personal issues.
But do you think they're spoiled by themselves, or do you think whatever we were talking about with, growing up with the instant gratification of the technology, of if you want a question in a second, you'll have the answer. Now with ChatGPT, it's going to get worse. So we are creating that environment for these generations to feel that, the instant gratification, they want to work smart, but not hard. But I think this is where the wisdom...
helicopter parents are to blame for this as well, I think, because if your parents always step in and solve every problem and every difficulty that you have, then you never learn how to solve it for yourself. And so you are totally helpless, and you're used to having all your needs and wants being met. And sorry, life is unfair. It just doesn't work that way.
That's why we need generations wiser right now, with much higher knowledge maturity.
You and me, okay.
Hopefully, yes. Dr. Richard, if you want to leave our listeners today with one takeaway from your great book, what would you leave them with?
I want to say go to bed is the biggest thing that you could do, and don't look at your screen at night, and don't watch TV in bed. But the other would be to take breaks, stop and slow down, and give yourself the gift of silence and pauses, and you're going to discover that something really wonderful happens if you do that. Instead of FOMO, the fear of missing out, if I don't have my phone with me all the time, I'm going to be missing something. You're not going to be missing anything. What you're missing is your life. That's what you're missing, because you're so glued to this device. And it's a wonderful device. It's fantastic. It's very useful, but it also has pretty bad downsides to it. And you have to know what those are. And you have to be willing to maybe withstand a little bit of discomfort and not having it with you every moment, and sort of wean yourself off of it bit by bit until you're able to go through the day and have actual periods of time when you're not distracted by any kind of screen device, when you're able to be productive, be creative, get something accomplished. And you'll be able to accomplish it much faster and better than if you were trying to do it with all these screens throwing push notifications and texts at you.
Great words of wisdom, Dr. Richard. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And with that, we've reached the end of this week's episode. I truly hope you found value in our discussion. Thank you so much for tuning in and being part of our community. Until next time, take care and keep elevating your most important asset, your knowledge.
You have been listening to the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Layla Maroof. If you want to join the movement of knowledge mindfulness and shape the world of tomorrow, go to drlaylamaroof.com. The Knowledge Mindfulness Porch is a production of Forbes Books.